Hello and welcome back to Early Access title Theme Park Studio. This is video number 5 in the series Build With Me, and today we'll be looking at some of the basic and advanced coaster editor features that are available in the game. As has been the case, we'll try to go slow enough so that those who would like to follow along may do so. I hope to share with you some tips and tricks that will help you to build coasters and show you some things that you may or may not already know. For a review of texturing and landscaping, please see the prior 4 videos. So we're going to go ahead and get started by looking at some of the properties of this pre-built coaster that I built prior to the video. If you'd like to follow along, go ahead and build out a simple coaster. It doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to theme it out like I've done in this one. We just need a coaster to look at some of the properties to begin with. So before we begin to look at the coaster properties, let's go ahead and catch any new players that we have who may not have built a coaster before. Let's go ahead and catch them up. This will be a lightning quick review on coaster building. We certainly won't build out an entire coaster, but this will at least give you the general principles of where we all start to build a coaster. So click on the coasters button, then the train icon, and select the type of train that you'd like to build. If you hold down the Alt key and drag in the direction that you want to place the track to start with, then left click to place it. If this is your first coaster, I'd recommend adding a station. And from there, the coaster editor pops up, which is simply point and click. Now, if you've used Roller Coaster Tycoon in the past, this should be pretty self-explanatory. You simply click the track type that you'd like to build and click on Build. And I'm not going to build this entire coaster out. You have specialty segments down here that you can choose that build various different segments of track, and then some various options down here. Now, one thing you can do if you're new to the coaster building is go to Help, Documentation, and look at the coasters tutorials. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. And we're going to go back to our other coaster, and if you need to pause the video, go ahead and create your coaster and come back when you're ready. So we're going to begin by looking at the coaster nodes, which are designated by the round balls on the track. When you select them, you notice that each node gets selected. This is also similar to how paths are constructed. Each path has a node. So go ahead and select any node on your track, and then hold down the left mouse button, and you'll notice that you can move that node around freely. So by holding the left mouse button, you can actually move the nodes around. Now, when you're building a coaster and the piece isn't long enough, before you actually go on to your next piece, you could select the ending node and move your piece out. That's a good trick for smoothing, making coasters much smoother than you can get in the basic coaster editor, which we'll go over in a little bit. So left mouse button will move your track around freely. Some other ways that you can affect this coaster node are with the Control, Alt, and Shift keys. So go ahead and hold down the Shift key and left click and drag up or down, and you'll notice that it increases and decreases the height on your coaster node. The Alt key will put a left and right bend on a horizontal plane on that node, and the Control key will increase and decrease the height on a vertical plane of that particular node. Now there's 3 options up here: the Move, the Rotate, and the Scale. If I select the Rotate option and I hold down Alt, it now changes to a bank tool where I can change the bank of my track or change the bank of that node. And this is really useful when you're going around after you've built your coaster for tweaking the various nodes and smoothing out the coaster parts. As mentioned earlier, you can get some really nice coasters with just the basic coaster editor, but for those who want to take it to the next level, this is where some of the advanced coaster editor features with these nodes come into play. So if you want to go ahead and play around with the Control, Alt, and Shift keys in these various move, rotate, and scale options, go ahead and pause the video and do that. We're going to go ahead and move on. I think we'll come back to those when we actually go and build a coaster in a little bit. For right now, I just wanted to show you some of the coaster effects that you can put on the individual nodes. Now the next thing we'll want to look at is the node properties window. So again, go ahead and select some node on your coaster. And under the coaster menu, make sure that it's expanded so you see the node properties button. Click that. And this brings up the segment or node properties. For each node that you select, it will give you the X, Y, and Z coordinates of that node. So I can see the X, Y, and Z coordinates of this particular node. And that's helpful for people who are trying to build a coaster to scale, or someone who is trying to determine the height of a particular node. These options under directions give you an alternate way to manipulate that particular node, like we used with the Shift, the Alt, and the Control key. So this is a different way that you can modify this particular node. And you have finite control here with the counter buttons, increasing and decreasing almost minutely. Now the tension option is useful in a curve. What this does is actually controls the entrance and exit tension of the bank or turn that you have. So if I determine that this bank is too tight and it's causing jerkiness in my coaster, I may want to extend out the enter tension, and I can do the same for the exit tension. And the goal of what you're trying to do is just look at the coaster and imagine the coaster coming down the track, and how smooth is that going to be. So by playing around with the various node options and adjusting the track, you can really smooth out the effect of the coaster from what you would get in the basic coaster editor. So those who want to take the coaster to the next level, node editing is something that you're really going to want to pay attention to. So additionally, in the node properties window, you have the accelerator and the brake options. If I select a piece where I have a brake, I can set the brake properties. Is it enabled? Is it not enabled? What is the brake pressure? I believe that's 0 to 50. If I change it to 50, the coaster will always slow to my target speed. The lower this number, the lower the brake pressure. So if the coaster's coming at 100 miles an hour and I only have this set to 10, chances are the target speed's not going to be reached because the coaster has too much momentum. So play around with the brake pressure and target speed numbers until you get the effects that you want. Same thing with the accelerators. Here in the coaster node properties, I could change this from a brake to a launch, which is an accelerator, and then set the accelerator windows. How much torque, how much push do I want to give the coaster? Again, I believe this is 0 to 50. If I give it 50 and set it to 100 and just say 100, if that piece is long enough and the torque's high enough, the coaster will accelerate to 100. Now if this is a short piece, the coaster may not accelerate that much simply because it's run out of track. Okay, let's talk about coaster supports real quick, and you're going to get to that by opening the coaster menu and clicking on the support menu or button. And here you'll notice that it turns all your supports purple. Each node support gets turned purple. You can hold down the left mouse button and drag those supports to different parts of the track. You can also select the support node and then press delete to delete the node completely. And you can add custom supports to the track to customize your coaster just the way you want it. Now those are pretty powerful, but what you can also do, and I've done an example over here, is created some custom supports. And the way that I do that is to open up the custom scenery icon button and select new and select the cylinder shape. And using the Control, the Alt, and the Shift keys, I shape it to how I want it to place on the track and then place it. And I can texture those, opening the Material Editors window, and give them different textures. For these supports, I simply opened up number 3 under the custom scenery and used some of the drop tower pieces. Now I've seen some Steam users actually use these for supports, and their coaster turned out really neat. So again, you can play around with that. You're not limited to just the supports that are included in the coaster editor. If you want to get creative, you can build your own type of support structures. Again, these are really generic, really basic. If you want to put the time into it, you could create some really neat stuff. And I think that's about all we need to cover on supports. You can move them around, place different types of supports, delete them, add them, and yeah, that's about it on supports. Okay, one of the last things I think I want to cover before we actually begin to build a coaster is the Coaster Properties window, and you get to that under the Coaster Properties button. Now the only time that I've seen values in here, and others can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but it's when you select the end of the coaster, the white node, that you can actually set some of the properties of the cars, the colors, as well as number of trains that actually run. Now number of trains are dependent upon the number of blocks and brake sets that you have on your coaster. We may or may not go through that in this video, but for a full explanation about the properties window, again, refer to the documentation. I did think of one other quick thing I wanted to mention. I've seen some people mention this on the forum. Just a quick tip that when you're trying to select a node, sometimes you'll notice that it will select an object underneath and you can't actually select that node. This happens a lot if you run a path underneath the track and you're trying to view the node directly over the path or where the path is obstructing. The application doesn't know which object you're trying to select in some cases, so it just selects the tree thinking that's what you want. The easy remedy to that is to simply move the camera around so that the obstructing object is no longer in the way, and then you should be able to select that node. So just move the camera around a little bit if you're having a hard time selecting what you need because something's obstructing. And I've decided, instead of continuing on in this video, I'm going to go ahead and cut this into a 2-part video, being we're running up to the 15-minute mark. So I'm going to go ahead and end part 1 here. This has been video 5 in the Build With Me series, and I'll see you in part 2.